Hello there, people of the internet. A very loud and hardcore shout out to both FPC and GOA, who are in the trenches fighting the good fight for you and I, law abiding American citizens, every day. I'm out of coffee, so I'm having to resort to tea. I have a massive stockpile of tea on standby just because I normally drink coffee. Anyway, recently I made a video, and this video was about what jackets are whenever it comes to projectiles and why they exist. Now, one thing I did not directly cover in that video was the fact that jackets reduce friction from the projectile to the barrel. I was hoping that whenever I was talking about the engagement of the rifling in the barrel itself, the idea of friction, which is definitely a variable whenever it comes to the engagement of the rifling, the idea of friction would be one of those things that is self-evident. But it was not, so I'm going to go ahead and directly spell it out whenever I say the jacket definitely helps out with friction as opposed to the lead in the projectile. Now, who can tell me why the harder copper or bimetal or whatever it is that you're using, who can tell me why the harder jacket actually has a better friction coefficient than the lead in the projectile? If you can tell me the science behind that, then hey, 10 points to you. Now, in the comments of that video, somebody had brought up that you can achieve the same thing with paper or grease jacketing. And I figured I'd go ahead and make a video talking about how paper jackets and paper cartridges actually exist. We got so many new gun owners out there. And with these new gun owners that don't know a lot about firearms technology, whenever I tell them about paper cartridges, it like blows their mind. I'm like, yeah, brass cases weren't, a thing that always existed, but we had technology in between muzzle loading and actual firearms cases. And then I tell them that we had casings made out of paper, and they're just like, what? How? It seems that people think that the casing itself is the load-bearing factor whenever it comes to the explosion of the cartridge. I'm trying to word this as easily as possible for people to understand. When the round detonates, people think that the brass casing or the steel casing stops the explosion from coming out the backside of the gun. In a sense, it does because it creates a pressure seal, but for the most part, the chamber of the firearm itself is what stops this exploding pressure from coming out the back of the gun and into your face. So whenever I tell people about these cartridges that are made out of paper, they're like, how the hell does it seal up? How the hell does it, not explode directly into your face? And I'm like, well, 9 times out of 10, there's some sort of grommet or some sort of gas system designed in the bolt of the firearm itself that would seal up and stop the pressure from coming back into your face. I was actually having a discussion with somebody not too long ago, and they said that steel cases could withstand more pressure than brass cases because steel is harder than brass. And I'm like, that's not entirely how that works in the terms of firearms technology, but I like your enthusiasm towards firearms. But yeah, paper cartridges. The idea of having a sustained cartridge all in one piece was something that happened very, very early in firearms technology, but not too early. The paper cartridge more or less consisted of, whenever you have one that you didn't tear open and pour in like a muzzle loader, you would have the projectile on the front of the cartridge with black powder cased behind it. And inside of the paper itself, there would be a priming compound upon which, instead of a firing pin striking a primer, it was a needle that stabbed into the cartridge itself, igniting that priming compound inside the paper. Although be it a less reliable system and it would wear out the needle very, very quickly, it was super effective. especially in comparison to the people that had to, you know, pour the powder down their barrel and ram a ball down it and whatnot. Especially if you had a bolt operating rifle that allowed you to load from the breech one of these paper cartridges, you could fire abnormally fast in comparison to a muzzle loader. I wish that I had a firearm that utilized paper cartridges just so I could show it off, but I can't, so I'm gonna have to show photos in this video instead. Now, in terms of the projectile going down the barrel, although paper is a far less efficient way to reduce the friction of the projectile, it is possible to use paper as the jacket of a projectile. That paper jacket reduces friction and helps with the engagement of the rifling of said firearm. Though I am very, very doubtful that paper jacket would last very long with the velocity of the projectile, but that's just me speculating, imagining what would happen if you were to put a paper jacket onto a projectile. It did happen. It definitely was one of those things that happened simply because paper is far, far easier to use than copper or bimetal jacketing. But I wanted to go ahead and bring this up simply because it seems like every time I do with somebody who doesn't necessarily understand firearms technology or someone who's new to the game, it always blows their mind. So if you didn't know that paper cartridges were a thing or paper jacketing was a thing, then hopefully this right here helped click on some light bulbs. Alright, well, kind of a short-ish video, but I wanted to bring up paper cartridges because it's one of those things that I haven't brought up yet on this channel simply because I don't own one. But we have several million new gun owners in the US now, and they're all learning so much so quickly. And I wanted to teach somebody about paper cartridges. So if you didn't know anything about paper cartridges, hey, now you do. They're a thing. I think the French chassepot utilized them. You had the dry sea rifles. You had a couple of open breech rifles that utilized paper cartridges very, very effectively. Alright, well, I'm done rambling on about them. I'm just going to say, hey guys, thanks for watching, and go off, have a fantastic day. Hopefully you learned something here. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.